Welcome, one and all, to the Success Curious podcast. It's your man, Andy, here. And I'll tell you what, this is an episode that I've been looking forward to for a wee while. Jamin Heppell is the founding director of Mountains and Marathons. He is a leadership expert, but he's also one of the most inspiring humans I've ever had the fortune of meeting and connecting with. He's also the founder and director of programs for Headquarters Australia, which empowers young people with the skills, courage, and character to transform their world and reach their greatest human potential. But Mountains and Marathons, gang, it's a program that enables people to become more healthy, fulfilled, and impactful leaders. It is for those who are driven, curious, and want to leverage their career to create a positive impact on society. Now, I got introduced to this incredible bloke by a mutual friend of ours who said the first thing that she said about him was he's climbed up mountains backwards. So this kind of gives you a bit of an idea as to who this guy is. My man, it's a very, very warm welcome to you. How are things?
Andy, so good to be here, mate. Thanks for having me. I'm well, man. I'm here. I'm ready to rock and roll and be in a rich and meaningful conversation.
Oh, man, you and me both. Tell, just for the listeners and for those watching on YouTube, just let everybody know, where are you right now?
No, so I'm in a beautiful part of the world. It's called Lake Atitlan in Guatemala. I discovered this place 3 years ago amidst my travels. And of all the places, the 54 countries I've traveled in the world, this specific spot is one of the places that I experience the most nourishment, feeling topped up. And yeah, this is where you find me right now, mate.
Now, I don't know if you've tagged it already, gang, but some of the language that's already coming out of this guy's mouth, it's decidedly different, and it's a lot deeper and more meaningful than you would perhaps expect. Because, mate, you're about as Aussie a guy as it gets, right? In many respects, right? You really, really are.
Yeah.
So it's really, really fascinating. Just to see the level of depth that you go to when you're thinking in your processes and in your emotions and all that sort of jazz. So I'm really excited to dig into that. But before we crack on, if you could give everybody a bit of an elevator spiel on who you are and your journey up to this point and what the heck got you to Guatemala.
So good, mate. Well, your introduction was spot on, mate. So thanks for that on-ramp. I'll just add a little bit more flavor to it. So, founder, director, leadership coach with Mountains and Marathons. The heart of what we do is all about supporting people to transform their life to live in deeper alignment and congruency with their deeper truth. And so how we do that is predominantly through our Align Leadership Program. It's a 6-month holistic transformational leadership program that includes a combination of group coaching and individual coaching, but it graduates with our clients coming together to run a marathon or climb a mountain in some beautiful part of the world. So our most popular programs are the Mount Kilimanjaro Align Leadership Program in Tanzania, the Machu Picchu Align Leadership Program in Peru, the Everest Base Camp Align Leadership Program in Nepal. We've got a few other ones that we throw in the mix as well. But really, the heart of this is it's about inviting those who are already inspired to be the best version of themselves and make a difference in the world, and really ensuring that every aspect of their life feels intentional, it feels aligned, so that they can be the best leaders that they can possibly be. And it's obviously centered around the spirit of adventure as well. You know, all of us inside Mountains and Marathons, we have a strong spirit for adventure, and we want to be able to activate that part of people's spirit, their psyche, to be able to test and challenge themselves in really meaningful ways and have a really epic way to round out a holistic journey of transformation. So that's the heart of the core thing that we do with Mountains and Marathons. And then, just a couple of cliff notes on what got us here. The two key themes that have been consistent across the course of my entire life is sport and leadership. So whether that was being a sports captain throughout my teenage years, through to, school captain when I was in high school, through to then founding my first nonprofit leadership organization called Game Changers, which focused on leadership for young people in sport, which then evolved into becoming another organization called the Man Cave, looking at the ways in which we support boys and young men in high schools to become more resilient, more emotionally intelligent, more attuned with gender equality and other important social issues. So my entire life has been centered around growth, leadership, sport. And so then Mountains and Marathons, which was birthed in 2018, 7 years ago, was kind of really the next evolution of a work that's been dear and passionate for me throughout the years. And now I'm just doing it on an international stage, which is nourishing, it's meaningful, and I get to connect with incredible people around the world and guide these these really beautiful rites of passage initiations in some of the most incredible parts of the world.
Man, well, what was it in you? Because you've clearly been doing this, or you've been on this track from a really, really young age, right? You really, really, it's clear that you have. What was it? I mean, I know it must have been a subconscious thing to begin with, but what was it that made you become a bit more consciously aware that this was the track for you?
Yeah. So I've reflected on this a lot, and what I recognize, there's always been a curious bone in my body. Like even as a I remember even as a 14-year-old in year 8, I was just your classic footballer, basketball, like just a alpha young dude, just country town I grew up in, classic country kid, and there I am, lunchtime, year 8. Miss McCarg, my English teacher, approaches me and goes, "Hey, Jamin, I think you should have a go at this public speaking competition coming up in 2 months." And, initially the part of me that's trying to be popular and cool is like, nah, don't do that. That's social suicide. And then, but then 5 minutes later, there's another part of me that's like, oh, you should give that a go. And, sure enough, I circle back to Miss McCarg, and a week later, I'm spending my lunchtimes practicing public speaking. And so I don't want to deny like that part of me that's always kind of been there, but with that as kind of like a foundation, as well as having sport and leadership as like a baseline passion, when I was 17 and I was school captain, I got invited onto a leadership development, a 6-day retreat, leadership development retreat for young people. And it was facilitated by 12 passionate volunteers, all in their 20s, who just gave a shit about leadership development and the future of young people. And they just facilitated the most incredible experience of my life. Like I still relate to that week as one of the most impactful 6 days of my entire life. And basically what happened in that week is I got in touch with such a deep sense of purpose and what I'm here to bring to the planet, that I came off the back of that retreat going, wow, what those guys just led for me, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to do that bigger and better and more professionally, and take it as far as I can possibly go. So, that as a 17-year-old, what I recognized, because I didn't know it at the time, but I realized there was a lot of privilege in being connected to a deep sense of purpose and clarity of purpose at such a young age, which then meant decision-making around what I wanted to do in my future was actually fairly easy because it just needed to be oriented towards that purpose. So that was kind of probably the biggest like inflection catalyst, was that retreat. And then after that, I mean, my vision was just to ensure that as many people as possible could experience something similar to what I experienced that week when I was 17. And so I've effectively been doing different versions of that for the last 18 years.
Honestly, man, we're really going to dig into this whole topic of purpose and owning who you are, because it's been something that I've been very open and honest about, in the sense of I actually don't feel that I've discovered my real sense of purpose and really be able to really have the ability to define it until very, very recently. And and it applies to things like decision making. We're going to talk about that massively. Before I go any further though, and I cop more of a bollocking off my editors, I need to ask you the one question we ask all of our guests, which is, what is your definition of a successful human? Now, I've got this belief that there are different elements to it: success, connection, influence, and happiness. And they all live in a bit of an ecosystem where one can't survive without the other. Jamin Heppell, what is your definition of a successful human?
Oh, what an epic question. I think about this a lot, and I actually orient my entire life around my answer to this question, which is, as concisely as possible, it is the ability to be able to be with and respond to anything that arises in my field, in my life, with power, with humility, and with resilience. So it's not so much about what one achieves, it's more so how well can I be responding powerfully to whatever it is that's arising in my experience, moment by moment by moment.
That's I forget, well, I could have seen it coming a mile off, but that is such a different take on this, because you're the first person that's talked about success as a topic as an inward thing as opposed to an outward thing,
Mm.
which is insane, which is absolutely insane. Let's just touch on that a little bit, because, and I think it does relate to the deep connection of who you are,
Mm.
right? You're like that deep connection of understanding why you exist. You talk about, you've just said there, it's whatever's coming into my existence, whatever's coming into my universe with power, humility, and resilience. So the question that I want to ask first off the back of that is, because success, everybody sees success as an outward thing, something that they progress to. You're seeing success as the ability to stay in who you are while things come towards you.
Mm.
So you're obviously clearly wired for attraction in terms of things, abundance and all this sort of stuff, right? That's
Mhm.
that's obviously center to your sort of philosophy here. Why is it then? Have you ever, or have you ever had a penny drop moment whereby you've gone, where you've gone to try and strive for something, or you've gone to go do something, or achieve something, you've gone, nah, this doesn't feel right. Like,
Mm.
where you felt you've sort of been going out, trying to go out of your universe, and it's not felt right. Have you had a sort of moment around that?
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, man. Well, I think a lot of it became really clear for me uh, throughout my 20s. As much as I've always been connected to a deep sense of purpose and vision and mission. There was also the egoic part of me that wanted to be the successful entrepreneur. And so I stepped into the what I call the entrepreneurial rat race, which is doing whatever's required to avoid a 40-hour week by working an 80-hour week. And I'd created 3 different leadership organizations by the age of 25, and I was hustling to keep these things afloat. And it became unconsciously, it was the narrative of being the young, successful entrepreneur identity that I was like attached to as much as committed to the impact that these things were having. And so ultimately, what that led to was me hustling my ass off for years and years and years, until in 2016, I had a full on breakdown, like head in my hands, head in my hands, bawling my eyes out, in complete, what do you call burnout? I was just completely burnt out and didn't love who I was. And yet externally, I was being celebrated and awards and magazine articles and all the things. But behind the scenes, I was just struggling and I didn't love who I was. And so that for me was where I received such an intense lesson of like, oh wow, I commit myself to being a positive role model for young people, but I wouldn't want anybody to be like me. And so for me, that breakdown was a real kind of like awakening moment and a smack in the face, going, well, okay, it's all very well and good to try and make a positive difference in the world, but if I'm burning myself out in the process, what good am I doing anybody? And then that was where there was a real recognition that it's like, success it's an inside out game. It is about ensuring that I am a transmission and a full embodiment of the kind of vision that I want to see in the world, that I am emitting that and transmitting that moment by moment by moment, in order to create the change that I want to see. Because this idea of trying to create external change whilst burning ourselves out on the inside, that's a fool's game. And, I realize and I see so many people doing it, pursuing this idea of success by creating all this impact out there whilst remaining discontent and dissatisfied and disconnected within themselves. And I'm just like, what's that for a life? So
Yeah.
I was able to tap that at, when I was 26, and then to do a complete reorientation towards what I now call alignment, which is about having that congruency between head, heart, and spirit, as far as like not only what we do, but more so where we show up from.
It really does relate to something that I've been mentioning to a few people. I refer to Alan Watts a lot when I talk about this, right? And I refer to the fact that he talks linguistically. There never exists, right? Because by the time you get there, it becomes here. So therefore, do you ever get there, right? And you're basically like a walking example of that, right? Because so many of us tend to, we do get enamored by the stuff, and we do get, caught up in that rat race.
Mhm.
And it is, you can almost call it a hustle rat race, where it's almost become well, it hasn't almost,
Mm.
it has become trendy to scuttle along as best as you possibly can and follow this crowd of entrepreneurial rats, because that's where everybody's going. So that's where you want to be. And it kind of appeals to humans' intrinsic nature of wanting to be part of something bigger than themselves, right? Particularly in young people right now, because there's a lot of Gen Zs and Gen Alphas right now. They're really struggling to find an identity because the amount of noise that's around them, it's made it increasingly difficult to be able to hear yourself. So that's why I've sort of observed, that's why you're seeing a lot more protests and a lot more things carrying on, because a lot of these younger people, they've got all the best intentions in the world, but they're doing it because they need to hitch their identity wagon onto something bigger, because they can't work out what their own identity is, right?
Yes.
And so I'm really fascinated, because I've written down this identity and embodiment. You said embodiment a couple of times, which is a tremendously powerful word. Um, from an identity point of view, and let's talk a little bit more sort of altruistically now, and we'll talk on this topic of people struggling to find their identity, or struggling to get the space to find their identity. Give us your thoughts on the current sort of state of the union when it comes to not just young people, because I think a lot of old people have got caught up, cost of living going up and all that sort of stuff, and they're feeling like they need to keep up appearances. The ability to really command and center yourself with who you are, because I was just saying there that a lot of older people, it's not just younger people, a lot of older people now, because of cost of living pressures and all this sort of stuff, feeling like they need to keep up appearances. I've lost someone very close to me off the back of them not being able to handle the fact that their identity was being changed because of financial constraints and pressures and so on and so forth. And he couldn't handle it and ended up, committing the ultimate, right? So talk to me about this whole concept of identity, man, because you could call it fortunate, but it's been obviously put into your DNA to have a sense of identity and purpose. But you'll have come across a lot of people. It's probably part of what you've done with your initiative. How can we, or what sort of things can you suggest and talk about when it comes to those that are really struggling to own who they are and then live it out?
Nice. Again, what a great inquiry. So part of the work that I do with people is I'll invite you into an exercise that I call creating your manifesto. Now, your manifesto is where you slow down enough to really attune to who do I really want to be? How do I really want to experience being alive? What do I really want to create? Who do I want to be? Who am I? Who am I here to be? What do I want to create? And getting really clear and detailed about that as a possibility, as an experience of being alive, highest possibility. So getting really clear on that. Now, it's a beautiful visioning exercise. Now, here's the thing that most people do is they do a visioning exercise or do a goal setting exercise, which again speaks to this Alan Watts piece of like it's a place to get to, like I'll arriving there. How we relate to manifesto or any kind of envisioning or goal setting exercise or identity creation exercise is it not being a place to get to, but a place to come from. So when I'm very clear on who I'm committed to being, how I want to experience the world, what I want to create in the world, what I want to see in the world, I look at that and go, okay, how do I show up as that now? What is the embodiment of that now? And that is that's from my perspective and my experience, that is where we truly discover our soul's essence and our authentic expression. When we're in touch with the frequency of our highest possibility and then choose to live from that place now. because from that place, that's when we start taking action that is entered into from the door of courage. Because in order to create any kind of transformation, it means that there must be a letting go of what has been to allow space for something new to arise and emerge. And courage is always the door for that. And so this could be, if I'm committed to being, like, part of my path is being a world-class speaker and sharing messages on stages. Well, there's a point in time where that, I'm on the path to that. Am I there yet? No. There being like, am I there yet as far as like on the stages? No. But am I courageously taking and being the person that's taking courageous and aligned action with that possibility? Yeah. So then in this moment, am I experiencing myself as the fullest embodiment of my possibility? Yes, because I'm showing up moment by moment congruent with highest possibility. And then results just start to come, like the universe is going to be responding to the courageous aligned action that's consistent with the identity, this manifesto that I've created. So I've just used it as a public speaking example, but you can also do the same thing from a health standpoint. Regardless of what your health is right now, if you have a vision for yourself of being strong, fit, flexy, sexy, right? Well, then the question isn't so much about what do I need to do for the next 5 years to bring that to life? It's like, no, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do tomorrow? Who do I need to be now? And then it becomes more about a game of consistency than it does become about these monumental leaps in order to facilitate our own transformation and live into the possibility that we have. So if we're talking about then a young person considering, well, who am I? How do I navigate this world? There's so much noise. Like, I just invite them to really sit down and get in touch with, well, how do I want to experience life? What kind of difference do I want to make? How do I want to be described by my closest people? What do I want to be remembered for? Like, being inside these questions and then asking yourself, okay, well, how do I show up right now that's consistent with that possibility? And when you get really practiced at showing up from that place, there becomes an internal a recognition of oneself begins to emerge as far as like what we're capable of. And then we start giving less shits about what other people think, because we start to love ourselves more and more and more and recognize, whoa, when I'm showing up from this place, I fucking love myself more. And those who are a vibe with me love me more. I love them more. And we start to create more of an energy of like, how good is it to be alive? So perhaps I'll put a little pause there and we can take it from there.
Mate, I could have let you roll on and on and on then. That was just absolutely tremendous. What I'm really intrigued by is that it's a place to come from, not a place you head to. Essentially saying, team, for your notes, for a bit of a translation, is that what Jamin's basically explaining there is that if instead of looking at a future version of yourself as something to go towards, become that now, and then align your decisions, your actions with that future version of yourself today, right now. And it's almost I relate. So when it comes to things like consistency and whatnot, I believe that we're, whether it is the entrepreneurial rat race that's to blame or whatever, popularism, words like consistency and discipline and sacrifice and those sorts of things, they are things that everybody understands and everybody knows and everybody believes and everybody agrees is stuff that is important if you want to be successful or, feel that sense of success. But at the same time, it's become white noise because the amount of times that people have said it. And I think the effect of it has become very, very minimal on society now these days. And so when we talk about when Jamin talks about having it as a place to come from, as opposed to a place to head to, what he's essentially saying is, instead of worrying about being disciplined and consistent and whatnot, be loyal to that person. Be loyal to that person, that version of yourself that you ultimately want to become. And I think loyalty, is a word that I believe can be used in a much more powerful way, because when it comes to causes and initiatives and drives and things like that, I dare say there'll be a lot of people that one week will be massive pro-Palestinian sort of protesters and all the rest of it, right? And then the next minute they'll be onto something completely different. It'll be a meet, and because there's so many different causes and so many loud things that people are trying to hitch themselves to, but a lot of the time they'll find themselves struggling to stay true and loyal to their own journey because they're too busy worrying about loads of other journeys, right?
That's I really like that, Andy. Yeah, being loyal to our higher self, like
I love
getting in
that.
touch. Yeah, who we, defining, and that's what manifesto is. It's like it's really getting in touch with and bringing language to our higher self, and so then like powerfully committing to being loyal to our higher self. I mean, that's the pathway to embodying who we are here to be and what our potential is on this planet. That's a really beautiful distinction and reframe.
Honestly, man, mate, I think that but I love this whole notion of success being something that you come from. So tell me, right? When we talk, so when Jamin's sort of got his vision board going and he's rocking and rolling and he's creating the next thing that he's going to try and go for, because that'll still be very much a part of you, right? You mentioned before we kicked off that you said you got a lot of amazing things to look forward to and all this sort of stuff, and it would have all been born from you being who you are and it would and all that sort of jazz. When you've got your sort of vision board and you're looking at 2026 and 2027, 2028, for example, how do you plot a course for success when essentially we're sort of reverse engineering? So do you look at essentially like what's the best version, what version of me do I want to see in 2028? And then do you reverse engineer from that?
Yeah, man. Great question. So if we zoom out for a second and we look at the nature of ambition and pursuing certain goals, typically, well, in fact, always, what is underneath an achievement is a desired state, a desired way. Like we want to feel something, and so what I want to get in touch with is like instead of being like, oh, I want to run this marathon or do that ultra marathon, I actually go, okay, well, when I start to feel that like pull to say yes to something ambitious, I'll always ask myself, okay, what's underneath that? Like what is it that I'm actually desiring to cultivate more of in my experience of being alive? And then when I can touch whatever that is, when I can distinguish whatever that is, that then shapes a much more intentional inquiry and goal setting process. So for instance, one of the things inside of this experience of being human, part of what's really important to me, like I look at freedom. I'm like, I love experiencing like freedom. Love and freedom are kind of like core to what I desire to experience more of in this lifetime. Now, if we look at freedom, most people will immediately go to time and money. And I'm like, yeah, these are pretty important resources as far as, having this sense of abundance and possibility and creativity. Yep, not denying that. But I also look at freedom. I'm like, what about physical freedom? Like the capacity for someone to be able to give me a phone call and be like, hey, bro, you want to go and run a marathon in Antarctica in 2 months? And I'm like, oh, to be able to say yes, I'm like, that's freedom. That's freedom. So then I'm like, okay, as far as living into my possibility, like living into my higher self, it's like, right, I maintain like marathon fitness. I'm flexible and strong. Okay, cool. I'm able to do handstand push-ups. I'm able to do, it's just like, so then, not because of like how cool that looks or the Instagram post, but because I see freedom in being strong, in being athletic, in being fit. So that's a component. Another component is like if I think about freedom, if you put me on an ecstatic dance floor, right? I never danced as a teenager. Dancing was not part of my journey as a kid at all. And then I'd be invited onto a dance floor in my 20s and I'd get real nervous and I'd feel like really uncomfortable and I'd be all up in my head and judging myself for how silly I must look and then comparing myself to everybody else. Now that for me, that is being trapped. There's no freedom there. So then I'm like, I desire to have more freedom in my self-expression in my body. So then I'll be like, okay, cool. Like what's a form of dance that feels really awkward and uncomfortable for me right now, where if I had the feeling of being embodied and feeling free in that form of dance would be a greater expression of freedom. So then I'll then like future cast and be like, okay, cool. I'm going to go and learn how to salsa. I'm going to go and learn how to do contact improv dance. because not because of how cool it's going to look on the other side, but because of my felt sense of freedom that I'll get to have when I get to move out of my head and be more in my body and less self-conscious in those kind of moments. Another example is like, I'm really passionate about the culture and community of East Africa, specifically Tanzania at the bottom of Kilimanjaro. I notice when I go there that part of my experience is limited because I can't speak the local language. And I'm like, I know that I would have a greater sense of freedom if I was able to be in dialogue with everybody around me. And so then I'm like, cool, I'm going to study Swahili because it's going to give me a greater experience of freedom when I'm in East Africa. So, I look at it from like, what do I want to feel? What do I want to feel? And then orient my goals around that. And freedom and love are kind of like two of the core pillars. So that's one part. The second part here is that it's always again, coming back to this, like success being like defining success and it being a place to come from as opposed to a place to get to, sure, there's going to be a certain amount of money in my bank account that's going to give me a greater sense of freedom and security. And yet what I'm also present to is like, 5 years ago, as a result of an injury that occurred to one of my participants in an organization that I used to run in my 20s. She got a bad injury. There wasn't the right insurance in place. And so then I got pursued personally to be sued to compensate for the medical expenses of this young woman's injury, which is a real shame that happened. But, then I got slogged over six figures to set up, to avoid going to the Supreme Court. And so, there I am, like being put well behind the eight ball as far as my financial goals. But the question that I was sitting with is like, okay, well, what story do I want to tell on the other side? As far as how I respond to this, what story do I want to tell on the other side? Now, for me, that's being far more responsive to being like, okay, like something's arisen in my experience that's like undesirable, absolutely, but I'm not going to be a victim to that. Like I'll be a little bit pissed off for a little bit. I'll be a little bit upset for a little bit and reflect on what could have been different, etc. But then I'll hit the moment where it's like, okay, what story do I want to tell on the other side of this? And now I recognize that happening 5 or 6 years ago is now core to shaping more of my resilience and resolve, and reducing my ambition because I've got greater capacity to be responding to what's arising in my field and not letting that get in the way or be the definer of what success is and what my life gets to be. And so, yeah, again, like that's kind of it. It's like it's an embodiment of an energy, a way of being that we create goals or aspirations from, as opposed to the photo on Instagram or the medal that hangs up on the wall. It's who we become in the process.
And it really it relates to something I've got at the front of my book because Aristotle talks about the greatest good. How people don't become artists for the paintings; they become artists for the feeling of being an artist. Right? The feeling that comes with being an artist is it's that ancient philosophy of searching for the greatest good.
Yes.
Which is just. You just described basically a modern version of that. There is no doubt. I want to ask you, how do you cope when you get injured?
Yeah, yeah, man. Again, I'll have my moment. I'll grieve. I'll be angry. I'll have all the feels. I'll allow myself to be in victim consciousness around the thing. And then I'll come back to the question, what story do I want to tell on the other side of this?
What story do I want to tell on the other side of this? Gang, that's for your notes. Bang that down in your notes because I'm writing that down now.
Yeah.
What story do I want to tell? What an amazing sort of little philosophy around, looking at it's probably better. It's probably a lot better about when you're thinking about shitty situations as opposed to really, really good ones, right? It's very, very easy to be able to say, right, well, the story I want to tell offers something really, really cool. But when it's adversity, gang, and we come back to Jamin's original definition of a successful human, which is to have power, humility, and resilience, right? Resilience. Because a lot of people think about the word resilience and they think it's associated entirely, just like what I did really, to the negative, right? You have to be resilient whenever something negative or opposing force comes towards you, right? But could you argue that you've almost sort of gone the polar opposite on both sides, right? When it comes to something negative, it is using the story, using this whole what story do I want to tell, is using resilience to be able to climb yourself out of that hole as opposed to trying to avoid jumping into it, if that makes sense, right? It's almost like a holistic acceptance that you're very, very quick to accept your current state of being, your current state of existence,
Yep.
and then using resilience to not push the opposing force away, but to sort of grab it
That's it.
and then take it with you as part of your story, right?
That's it.
Which is a very different way of looking at it, right? When you think about it, because
Yep.
resilience for a lot of people is defined by
The
pushing
fight,
against the
the
opposing
fight, the
force.
push, the hustle. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, very good. Very good.
But
You're tracking it exactly. It's choosing it fully. It's like choosing it fully because the real when shitty things happen, the real suffering occurs when we resist the reality of what is. When we resist that, that's when we're in the friction of like, fuck this. Whereas if we actually, but it's important to have that moment where we're like, but moving through the grief, moving through the stages of grief to then come to the place of acceptance, choosing it fully, and then moment by moment, choosing how we respond to moving from this current place and state to, again, higher possibility. And again, when you get reps in this muscle, we become far more agile, adaptive, resilient in being able to be responding to whatever is arising in our field, less reactive, and therefore, ultimately, whatever phenomena, whatever's coming at us in real time is simply like a mirror for where we get to cultivate more acceptance, more responsiveness, which then gives us greater capacity to simply be present and in touch with this goddamn miracle of what it is to be alive.
Honestly, man, my breakfast is going to taste better later. I'm telling you now, it's going to taste better after this. Honestly, it really, really is. What an amazing conversation to start my day. So, mate, before I let you go, I wanted to get your thoughts around leadership, but intergenerational. The challenges around leaders that are from one generation leading those that are from other generations, right? Because you work with young people, older people, you work with leaders that have been around the block and have become whatever it is, CEOs of whatever. And you work with the real young, like the proper teenagers and stuff like that, right? I want to get your take on this because a lot of people, I think, especially in business, but just generally speaking, like when my boys just started in a soccer team, and you see the challenges that a lot of people in community organizations are having around understanding how to lead young people these days, right? And how to help guide them these days. Because of the volume of stuff, the volume of information that these young brains are having to sort of interpret and compute and whatnot, right? Give us your sort of thoughts, your opinions on the state of leadership in society right now, and how can we, based on your vast knowledge and experience and understanding in education, how can we improve the way that we lead when it comes to when it comes to understanding different generations? Because when it comes to sort of boomer, Gen X, Gen X, the differences were relatively minimal. But I think the differences between each generation as time has gone on has just increased vastly in terms of how different their operating systems are. Give us your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so okay. Just to be at the outset, I mean, it's pretty layered, and it's a big, it's a big
Question.
It's a big question. So we'll just have that like named, and I'll just offer a couple of things that might be fuel for thought. Um, regardless of our age, one of the most important things for people to inquire into and cultivate is the ability to be curious, and to be adaptive and to be flexible in the way in which we navigate our beliefs and the way in which we communicate, the way in which we navigate our emotional reactivity. Regardless of our age, this is an important capacity and inquiry to be inside of, because yeah, I mean, we are in a stage of life. Here we go. I was in Egypt last week, and it was my first time being in Egypt, and there I was learning about these pyramids that were built 4,500 years ago, and I'm like, whoa, that's a long time ago. Then I went to the I went to the museum next to the pyramids, and it took us on a journey where it showed at the very start of the museum, it showed us these little stone tools that were from civilizations or humans from 750,000 to 250,000 years ago. Now, if you look at the nature of those stone tools across the course of that 500,000 year period, they didn't change much. Like technology didn't change much in that 500,000 year time period. And yet there we were at 4,500 years ago, 2,500 BC. And then here's this incredible civilization that we're able to organize hundreds of thousands of people around this like working structure. And then we look at how we as a species have continued to develop different kinds of technology across the course of the last 4,500 years. I look at that and I'm like, wow, well, humans have been on the planet for nearly 1 million years. and it's only been in the last 4,500, 5,000 years where technology has kind of hit this inflection point where we've moved from basically flatline, and then we've just hit this hockey stick curve where we're now starting to head in damn near a vertical direction about how fast technology is evolving and adapting. So if we look at that, the nature of the intergenerational difference is the most that it has ever been in the history of all of humanity. And that is only going to become so our ability to be adaptive in our beliefs, adaptive in our ability to take on new things, to remain curious about where we're currently at, where others are at, what they believe, why they believe that, and be both in a place of curiosity as well as agility with our beliefs. This is a really important thing to be cultivating regardless of our age, because that is a skill set is essential for any human being in leadership of self and leadership of organizations and families, because that technology curve is just getting more and more and more and more vertical, which demands a greater and greater capacity to let go of yesterday, to embrace today, to let go of yesterday, to embrace today. If we're remaining rigid in our thinking and the way things should be and not attuning to what's arising in the today, then there's just going to be more like friction. Now, so that's like kind of baseline piece around that, the agility of the mind. And maintaining baseline respect, integrity, honesty, like these core timeless principles of what it is to just be a contributor to our community. These are also just qualities and values that we need to be continuing to cultivate within ourselves, because they are going to be timeless no matter how fast our technology moves and no matter how much the difference is between the last generation and the next. No matter our age, we need to be cultivating those values of integrity, of honesty, of loyalty, of respect at a baseline. So that's probably what I'll offer, man, amidst a very big and dynamic question.
No, mate, I think no, I love that. I love the distinction between timeless and timely when it comes to that skill set, right? Timeless being your integral thing, what it is to be human, honesty, respect, courtesy, all those sorts of things. But then right now, curiosity, adaptability, and flexibility. I've been saying this thing about how perspective gives us power, and therefore the more perspectives we learn, the more powerful we are within when it comes to controlling our own universe and whatnot. And I think that being curious, adaptable, and flexible, I think a lot of people become so become so sort of calcified in their thinking around things like leadership and what it means to be a leader, and and they beat the drum as best as they possibly can and for as long as they possibly can until it's fucking done. Whereas and you can almost you look at, and we're not going to get political, but there's sort of inherent core values that certain political movements have and parties have, where there's a bit of a where the friction is through those core values that that political movement or that whatever it is has, that is in absolute sort of uh, opposite sort of forces with the need to be curious, the need to be adaptable, the need to be flexible in order to be able to exist and maintain an existence in the current way that the landscape's going, right? It's
Exactly.
really, really interesting, man. I love it. I love your little. I love the overview, we could go on and on and on about that stuff, right? I'm
Of
sure. I'm
course.
sure you've got lots and lots of things that you could say about it, but that's a really, really good thing for everybody to have in your notes. Is yes, you have that baseline forever. Those values, those traits that will forever and a day be important, like honesty, respect and things like that. But as Jamin really, really helpfully pointed out there, 500,000 years of doing not a lot, 5,000 years of doing a shit ton, means that at some stage or another, we're going to have to get with the fact that the world's gone vertical. It's not horizontal anymore, right?
Mhm.
So the leaders are ones that can understand that narrative to a greater extent. Mate, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. You are genuinely one of the one of the coolest humans that I've ever had the privilege of meeting, man. I know I could try and come up with a more profound word, but I just can't. Um, so, so mate, I think it sounds like I need a coffee or something because the big words have escaped me already. But mate, I value this connection so much, man. I really, really do. The value that you've just brought into the last 45 minutes or so has been truly, truly, truly phenomenal. And
Mm,
and if no one else does, I know I bloody appreciate it like there's no tomorrow, man. I'll be
mm,
forever appreciative of what
mm,
you've talked about. The whole notion, gang, of success being something that you come from as opposed to something that you go to.
mm.
That's a fascinating concept that is going to have me thinking for a wee while I go shout some auctions and shout at a few people for a little while, right? Mate, before I let you go, what a phenomenal conversation this has been. Um, I'm pumped. Before I let you go, though, I always ask this one question of all, I guess, which is you'll be, well, I say you won't be heading towards your next version of success. You'll be coming from your next version of success. So, therefore, you would have identified a few things like Swahili and whatnot that is missing from your game as you identify and be loyal to that next version of success for you. What is, though, aside from Swahili, what is the one thing that you feel that you need to work on the most within yourself as you come from that next version of success for you?
Mm, mm. Yeah, wonderful. What a great question, and one that I sit inside of like frequently. Um, if I'm gonna be, yeah, if I'm gonna touch the most like tender and vulnerable thing, um, it is uh, it is a deeper knowing of the feminine heart. I've been incredible. I've been in some incredible romantic partnerships across the course of my life, and that and those relationships and connections have been some of the most um, profound teachers of what it is to be a man who I'm inspired to be, and I recognize coming off the back of a couple of connections over the last 12 months that there is more for me to get and more for me to integrate in my knowing and attunement to the feminine heart, so that I can again show up as even more congruent with who I'm committed to being and inspired to be as a leader and as a man on this planet in this day and age.
Man, lots of people talk about, right? And they all talk about this whole alpha thing and this pseudo bullshit version of alpha, that people refer to as toxic masculinity nowadays. I just think it's just a BS superficial version of it, right? What it means to be truly alpha, I think something that a lot of people don't really talk about is um, the ability. A true alpha male is someone that can truly and deeply understand all around them, all of those people around them and all around them, right? That for me is a true alpha, right? Someone that is calm in all of the chaos and is someone that is a level of understanding that allows them to bring people into their existence calmly and safely, right? Um, and what you're talking about there, mate, that's a huge it's such a big fucking step for so many guys to understand that it's not doing what Jamin just said then, Yang. That's got fuck all to do with the fact of becoming to do with like becoming soft or becoming too feminine or becoming feminine at all.
Mm.
He's not talking about that in any way, shape, or form. He is wanting to understand the feminine in order to become a greater alpha in who he is. Because that's what we're designed to be as guys. We're supposed to be alphas, but the whole topic of alpha has just been completely ripped to shreds and seen as a negative. When a true alpha is someone that truly understands, baseline, respects, any energy or whether it's masculine, whether it's feminine, whatever it is, and have
Nice.
a true ownership of your understanding around that, man. That's what Jamie's just talking about there. And shit, we could have a whole nother topic on that. But I'm conscious that I've got to let you go, mate. I've taken you away from, you're taking your attention away from beautiful lake that you seem to be, that you have parked your ass on right now. So I'm gonna let you go crack on and get back on with that. Jamin Heppell, thank you. Truly, thank you so much for spending some time with us today on Success Curious. You don't know how much it means to me, man, and how grateful I am, not only for you, but also for Emma. We'll tip the cap to
Give her a
Emma.
shout out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Give her a little
Did year
shout out.
12? Yeah. Haven't seen
Yeah,
Emma since year 12.
Emma Sullings, thank you so much for making this connection happen. Again, it means the world to me. I really appreciate it. Jamin, I'd love to stay in touch. I know you're dying all over the world. And do you ever come back to Australia?
Yeah, mate, I'll get back for Christmas and New Year's. It's a good time. It's a good time to get home.
Hey, look, Jamin, stay safe though, huh? Stay safe and look after yourself on your travels. And to you, team, thank you so much for joining me and tuning into this episode of the Success Curious podcast. What an episode it has been. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, my friends, and I look forward to catching you on the next episode. Take care.